and YouTube and LinkedIn. And we got me live from Charlotte. It's Saturday night. So my name is Ren Jones. For those that don't know me, I'm a certified personal trainer through the National Academy of Sports Medicine. I'm also a certified corrective exercise specialist through the National Academy of Sports Medicine. I'm also a level 1 and level 2 nutrition coach through an organization called Precision Nutrition out of Canada. Shout out to Canada. And I'm also a 3-time menopause coach. I've got 3 different certifications for menopause, one through MedFit, one through Girls Gone Strong, the organization. As always, shout out to Molly. I've completed Dr. Stacy Sims' course, Menopause 2.0. So I have all these different certifications because the population that I serve as an online coach is women. I serve that population. Unfortunately, I lost my mother to long-term health situations, lifestyle-related issues, stroke in her case. Lost my older sister, Robin, due to lifestyle-related issues, alcohol use in her case. Lost my baby sister, Danica, to lifestyle-related issues. Rest in heaven, baby sis, I love you. And I lost my brother, Rodney, to a heart attack many years ago. So I switched from being an insurance agent many moons ago to being a certified wellness professional, trainer, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm here to talk to you tonight about sort of the basics of the menopause spectrum and how that interacts with, specifically with exercise and how it interacts with nutrition. We won't be getting into a lot of depth here for 2 reasons. Number one, I am not a medical professional. I don't treat any medical conditions. And the more important, number 2, menopause is not a medical condition. It's a spectrum that women travel across at different ages in life. It's an individual experience. It's no more a medical condition than puberty is, right? It's just a transitioning of hormones that's natural and something that's supposed to happen, although it does come with some complicated symptoms. So I'm just going to get into the basics of it so that you ladies out there can advocate on your own behalf. You can get yourself the help you need from the medical professionals, the community that actually deals with this. I'm not here to provide any medical advice at all, just to speak about the 101, the basic of what it is, how to figure out if you're dealing with it or not, and what exercise and nutrition methodologies you might apply to have a more, for you to thrive through this transitional period of your life. Before I get into the details of the information, I need to pay the bills because I'm currently in my week of enrollment. So I've been enrolling new clients since Monday this week. My enrollment period ends on Sunday. So if you're a woman over 30, I only serve women in the context of what I do as a coach. If you're a woman over 30 and you want to get off the diet and exercise roller coaster, right? And if you want to build your healthiest relationship with your body, your healthiest relationship with food, without counting calories, without counting macronutrients, nothing wrong with that. It's just not what I do with my clients. And if you want to stay off the treadmill, then not permanently, because cardio is good for you. I'm not singing that song. But if those things sound like something that would help you along your wellness journey, match your intention for your health, DM me the word live, L-I-V-E. We'll have a short conversation, about 2 or 3 questions in the DM, see if my programs might be a good fit for you, and we'll take it forward from there if we need to. In any case, that's enough about me. Let's get into the subject. So let's talk first about sort of the basics, the 101 of the menopause spectrum, the transition. And to do that, we have to start at perimenopause. Perimenopause pretty much has 2 different phases to it. We'll get into that in a second. But perimenopause is basically the time at which your estrogen, specifically estradiol, E2, and progesterone start to fluctuate, right? And this isn't a steady decline. It's more of a roller coaster ride with loops and things like that in it. And perimenopause can be challenging, and this is how I deploy empathy with my clients in this phase. Be challenging because there aren't a lot of definitive things that we can apply to this stage because of the fact that things are fluctuating so consistently in this phase, symptoms up and down. Any testing that we could do wouldn't reflect the accuracy of the time of life, the period, the things that are happening internally with body tissue, et cetera, et cetera. And it's usually the phase in the menopause spectrum where the most change occurs most rapidly. The most significant changes that I can think of in the context of what I'm authorized to do is the change in muscle, right? Most of the muscle loss that women experience, women that are not training consistently, most of the muscle loss you experience will be in the perimenopausal phase, and most of the bone loss will be in the perimenopausal phase. We know that we've had some really recent research that sort of points to that time being the time at which most of the fluctuation happens. So the challenge with perimenopause is that so many women out there, A, kind of never heard of it, right? It's just nobody ever said anything about it. And B, there's not a clearly absolute medical testing diagnosis for proving that you're in perimenopause. What we typically go by is a symptom score. And for women on the other side of 35 through maybe 45, one thing that you might want to start doing if you have the ability to do is track very vigorously your menstrual cycles so that you're able to notice disruptions. I say that with the caveat of understanding that if you're taking an oral contraceptive, it makes it a lot more difficult to accurately track the symptoms that are coming along with your menstrual cycle. But to the extent that you can, perimenopause looks like two different phases. One phase where there's a slight disruption in flow, a little heavier, a little lighter, a little longer, plus or minus 7 days-ish. And then the back half of perimenopause, which is a disruption of menstrual cycle that's a little bit more perturbed. So much heavier, much lighter. Did I give birth to an alien versus where did it go? Where is it? And we see disruption of months in this case, 2 to 3 months at a time. That's the perimenopausal spectrum, and everything's fluctuating. The challenge with testing for that is that because the hormonal flow is so different from day to day, if not second to second, and because, what's up, Ada? I see you getting that knowledge, Ada. You know I'm going to pick your brain the next time I get to talk to you. Look like you got some good knowledge. One of my clients, who's an amazing coach in her own right, deals with metabolic health. Ada Ramos, she's down here in the Wellness Room LLC. If you don't follow her, go follow her. She's a wealth of information, and she is very clued in that discussion of metabolic health to insulin resistance, diabetes, et cetera, et cetera. She's an expert there. In any case, I'm going to keep going. But that perimenopausal phase, there's no definitive test that we can do because the estrogen and progesterone fluctuate so much during the course of any given day. You could go into the office, your doctor's office at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday, have blood drawn, and they say, oh, it's absolutely fine. Everything looks good here. I don't see any signs of it. You could walk out of the doctor's office, and by the time you get in the car, your hormones are fluctuating again. This is why there's not very much efficacy in the home testing kits. I know Clear Blue just came out with some home testing kits where you can know for sure. And I understand empathetically the desire to know for sure that you're in perimenopause. But as Dr. Carla D so brilliantly put it, I heard her talk about this with Celine Yeager on a podcast, Feisty Menopause. If you don't listen to that podcast, also I suggest listening to Feisty Menopause. Great podcast. But as she so appropriately put it, and I love this analogy, just because you're in a neighborhood, you can't tell what's going on in the houses by what you're observing on the street. And what she meant by that was that the hormonal profile that they get from a blood test, what's circulating in the bloodstream, is not always a great indication of what's actually happening in the tissue. So that's another caveat for a definitive test for perimenopause. Don't get me wrong, there are some advanced level tests that may give a little bit better detailed information, but generally speaking, we go by a symptom score. It's almost like testing your daughter for puberty, right? There's no puberty test necessarily. you would go by symptoms. Maybe some increased irritability, obviously things like spotting, et cetera, et cetera. Forgive me if you've never heard a man talk about this, but I have to serve my clients from a place of intellect, and I talk about it all because my clients need to hear it all. If I can't say period or vagina, I can't do my clients a good service. So I've got to quiet the 13-year-old boy inside of me and speak from a logical place that actually serves my clientele. These discussions have been hushed and brushed under carpet and talked about in dark corners for far too long, which is why so many of my clients, the first time they hear the word perimenopause is when they've got a catalog of symptoms, no, and some well-informed OBGYN says, oh, this is perimenopause. And a lot of them anecdotally have told me that their reply to that was, what? It's what? Because we just don't talk about these things. Thankfully, these amazing, intelligent, incredible Gen X women are blowing the lid off of the taboo around all things womanhood. Specifically in this year, I think we're going to see a lot more information come forward about the menopause spectrum. So perimenopause is your introduction, the gateway to this menopause transition, and it's marked by a lot of fluctuations. It's also marked by symptoms. I've heard different stories. Some people say the 34 symptoms of menopause. Some say the 37. I saw a list earlier today that said the 66 symptoms. But we can look to things like highly dysregulated menstrual cycle. Of course, if you've had a hysterectomy of any kind, whether ovarian or full, you won't be able to cite things by that marker. But we also see things like increased irritability, an increased sort of sense of fragility in your feeling not quite as adventurous, not quite as sturdy. I've had women describe it to me as just feeling a little bit more fragile and a little bit more cautious generally, because the perimenopausal spectrum affects your cognitive function, your ability, your resilience to stress, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the first stage. The second stage is menopause. Technically, menopause is just a day. It's the 12th month that you've no longer had, that you had no discernible menstrual cycle. So 12 months in, no period. The next day, it's menopause, or that day is menopause. It's just one day. And then everything after that time classified as postmenopause. And if you're thinking that's the rest of your life, you guessed it. The rest of your life after that day of menopause, you're in postmenopause, where science tells us that the hormones that were fluctuating start to sort of drift off, but also some of the symptoms and some of the feelings don't feel as urgent, anxious, wildly differentiating as they once did in the perimenopausal phase. So that's just a quick and dirty on the phases. Step one in advocating for yourself, ladies, in this regard is sort of understanding those phases. I suggest Dr. Stacy Sims as someone to follow. I suggest Dr. Jen Gunter as someone to follow. Stacy wrote a great book, Next Level. Dr. Jen wrote an incredible book, Menopause Manifesto. People like Celine Yeager. I suggest people like Amanda Thebe, who wrote another great book about menopause that's more experiential, called Menopocalypse. Highly suggest that book. And from there, you'll see sort of their cohorts, compatriots branch out from those people that I mentioned. Hot Flash Inc. Is another great podcast, another great follow here on Instagram, Facebook too, I think. But those are some people that I suggest, so that you can listen to actual experts who are not trying to scare you into buying something through sort of the diet culture doorway of menopause. There's going to be a lot of that going on this year, you guys. So find experts that have trustworthy information, who have done the research, who truly have credentialed expertise. Hang on to the hem of their garment for dear life, because we're about to go on a wild ride for menopause this year in social media spaces. I 100% guarantee that's about to happen. So you're going to get menopause supplements and probably some menopause milkshakes and menopause rubbing stones and menopause oils that you like. It's about to be the Wild West again. Root yourself in experts who actually have expertise, who are actually following the science. One thing I love about Dr. Stacy Sims, her course Menopause 2.0 that I took last year, she won't let you hold the certificate at this point more than a year. So she forces you to go back through an updated version of her certification course, citing the fact, rightfully so, that this research is coming in hard and fast, right? And she does not want to propagate any outdated research. So she doesn't want the people that have been through the course to hold on to what could be an outdated version of the coursework. And I love that. I respect that so much, as I do all the ladies that I mentioned and all the women that I work with as a coach. So we've got the quick and dirty on menopause. The second thing I want to go into here is advocacy for yourself. And the first method of advocacy here, because you may find yourself interacting with a medical professional who has high awareness, very informed about all things menopause and the transition, and people that have very low awareness. Unfortunately, the menopause spectrum discussion transition has not been a historical part of curriculum for medical professionals, and not just your typical MD. Even, unfortunately, and I didn't believe this when I heard it first, but even for your gynecologists, your OBGYNs, even those doctors who specifically study women's health, women's reproductive health, in most cases, not a few cases, in most cases, they had no course curriculum about menopause as they went through the process of getting their degree. Not to their fault in any way, shape, form, or fashion, but if they have knowledge, they would have had to go back through other means to acquire that continuing education knowledge. So because of that, it's so important that you have at least a baseline of knowledge to be able to meet with your medical professional and advocate on your own behalf, because they may say things like, well, you're too young to be in perimenopause. No such thing. Women find themselves in perimenopause in their mid-30s. That's not super uncommon. Also, there's a such thing as early menopause, and that occurs for reasons that we don't yet understand. But you can go through the full transition as early as your mid-30s. It's not common, but it can happen. And they may say things like it's all in your head, or you just have anxiety. So I want you ladies to have a baseline of knowledge at least, so that as you approach a medical professional, you can advocate on your own behalf intelligently and get the help that you need, because all too often women do not get the help that they need. Meanwhile, men can go online and Google a few things and order a packet full of erectile dysfunction medication at the drop of a hat. It's understood across the board. It's been well researched. It's easy to get access to. You may take yourself into a medical professional's office, give them some information about what's going on with you, ladies, and they may not be able to correlate it to menopause, because there could be weird things like disruption of your gastrointestinal system, right? A lot of women will deal with a change in how their body reacts to certain foods, because estrogen runs and its receptors run through nearly every system in your body. So the step that I would go to here is go to the website menopause.org. That's what was formerly known as the North American Menopause Society, NAMS. I think it's rebranded as the Menopause Society, but this is a North American organization that delineates all information menopause. Research is done there, the experts are there, but you can go to menopause.org, and they have a section that says for women. And you might be thinking, Ren, do they have a menopause section for men? No, I don't mean that. I mean, in addition to having resources for medical professionals, fitness professionals, wellness professionals, there's a tab there that's just for women seeking information. You open that up, and they have a window where you can enter your zip code, and it will give you a list of all the menopause-informed medical professionals in your area. So really the first step to getting great advocacy is finding yourself a an informed professional and aligning yourself with a medical professional who is menopause informed. If you look at my home page here on Instagram, you'll see I list myself as a women's coaching specialist, and underneath that I say menopause informed because of the 3 certification process that I went through, because of the 3 books that I read on the subject, and because that's the population that I work with every day, and I'm still learning as much as I can to serve that population. So we've discovered what the transition phases of the menopause spectrum are. We talked a little bit about how to advocate for yourself in that regard, where you can go to find a menopause-informed medical professional. Let's talk quickly about how this time of life and these hormonal changes tie into your exercise, perhaps, and your nutrition, perhaps. Let's start with the exercise because that's my area of expertise along with the nutrition. But let's start with the exercise. What you may find in the spectrum, and the reason I say what you may find is because every woman has a wildly individualized version of this time in their life. Menopause and the transition expresses itself through each woman's body individually. You may go across 5 different women and no 2 of them have the exact same response to this transition of their hormonal profile. So to that end, a few things that we do know. 1, strength training has become incredibly important. If you have not already been strength training, I don't need to turn you into a power lifter, but we've got to get you to a place where your muscles are being taxed by gravity. We need some type of resistance training for a couple of reasons. One reason, biologically, estrogen was an assistant in helping you get great muscle contractions, right? It's a part of what estrogen does for women in their body, and there are estrogen receptors that go through the muscle tissue. And if the tissue has the receptor for estrogen, that means the hormone is important to that tissue. I hope that makes sense. So, muscle may not contract as easily and may not be stimulated as easily as it was in your pre-menopausal years, your regular reproductive years before perimenopause entered the picture. So for that reason, excuse me, I got my juice right here. Let me get some juice, y'all. That's delicious. So you may find that, you're probably going to need to integrate some strength training into your protocol, right? The second reason for the strength training is that estrogen plays another, I don't want to say it, that's negative. The second reason for the strength training is the withdrawal of estrogen also leads to an increase in the rate at which you lose muscle. It's called sarcopenia, right? And that's age-related muscle loss. We know this starts to happen on the other side of 30, and it's not just for women, but we know this happens on the other side of 30. The body starts to lose muscle a little bit. I've heard estimates of 3 to 8% muscle loss per decade if it's not otherwise, intervened, and that's about right. But we know that it accelerates even faster once you get into the perimenopausal stage because that withdrawal of estrogen minimizes your ability to maintain muscle. It also minimizes your ability to uptake protein, but we'll get to that in a second. Your muscle is so important. More research has come out really just in the end of 2023, like the back half of 2023, about muscle and its impact on the likelihood of Alzheimer's and cognitive decline. We know more about muscle and its impact on your cardiovascular health. 1 in 3 women will die from cardiovascular disease around the world, and the rate of cardiovascular disease also increases in the menopause spectrum. So we want to maintain muscle. And the third reason for that muscle is, ladies, that's your independence. I probably said that every day this week on the live broadcast, but your ability to maintain muscle is your declaration of long-term independence. It is your travel in your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. It is your ability to dance, drive yourself where you want to go, make a delicious meal if you want to make one, right? Muscle is going to allow you to have a long health span, right? Along with a long lifespan. A lot of times we only look at lifespan, we don't take into account health span. Let me tell you what a witness I am, because I saw my mother have a cardiovascular incident at age 60, long before I became a trainer, and her health span ended at 60. Her lifespan ended at 77. So for 17 years, my mother, God rest her soul, fiercely independent woman, registered nurse of 30 years or more, a lady that don't take no shit off nobody. She had her children helping to give her care for the last 7 years. See, we didn't mind. It's our mom. I mean, are you kidding me? Obviously, we do that. But I don't think there are very many mothers out there whose long-term dream is to lose their health and independence and have their adult children take care of them for nearly 2 decades straight. Coincidentally, my mother was being taken care of by my brother when he had a massive heart attack and died. And my mother was being taken care of by my sister when she drank alcohol due to depression, got in a car, drove, and accidentally hit a tree and died. So the caregiver responsibility, that sandwich generation that a lot of you ladies might be in right now, where you're caring for your offspring, but you're also caring for your parents, let's just avoid that and do some strength training, don't you think? So that's got to be a part of your exercise protocol during this time of your life. The second thing, exercise-wise, is you're going to need some impact, some pull on your bones, right? That could come, as long as you're medically cleared to do so. Let's point that out first. That can come in the form of impact training. We call it plyometric training, right? Jump training. And it doesn't you don't have to jump up on a 6-foot box, for God's sakes. But this could be jumping forward with 2 feet, jumping sideways, jumping backward. The research shows us, as I got it from the MedFit certification, that even 10 minutes twice a week of that type of impact training will make your bones more resilient and can increase your bone density over time. Good news, ladies, we found that you can actually reverse that bone loss, which is amazing, if we can incorporate some jump training, some impact training. And it needs to be multi-directional. Running doesn't do it. Sorry to the runners out there. But if you're playing something like pickleball, where you're going here and there and you're backing up sometime and going forward, dance. Who doesn't love to dance? Get into a good dance class and just dance it up. Hop around, do whatever you, what was the Far Side? Jump around, jump up and get down. They made that song for you ladies. Go back and rewatch Mrs. Doubtfire at the beginning if you can't remember the song. Great song. So we want to do that. That needs to be a part of your exercise protocol. And with my clients who are in the spectrum, I insert that into their exercise protocol with the caveat of whether or not their bones are currently healthy enough to do that. I don't want to endanger anybody. But we know the prevalence of women I think it's something like 30% of women who break their hip die within 2 years of the fracture or something like that. So we want to look out for that. That's something that we want to consider. The next thing we want to consider in that menopause phase, as estrogen withdrawals, as we have an increased risk of cardiovascular disease, as we have an increased buildup of body fat in the midsection, and also behind the abdominal wall, that intra-organ fat, that visceral fat that we talk about. We want to look at sprint interval training, where you go as hard as you can for about 20 seconds, whether that's on an elliptical, whether that's on a bike, whether that's running up a hill, whether that's running a treadmill, whatever you can sprint on, whatever device or methodology you can use to go as fast as you possibly can for about 15, 20 seconds, and then go easy for 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes to have a full recovery. That's the type of cardio that we want to get involved in at this stage, because it's good for overall reduction of the visceral fat in the abdominal wall. It's good for maintaining muscle. We feel like the strength training combined is good for brain cognition, releases something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. So that brain fog that you might be feeling in this menopause spectrum, probably do a little something about that too. So those are things to consider exercise-wise as you find yourself in that spectrum, in the menopause spectrum. The third thing that I want to talk about, and I'll close this thing right down. I'm closing now, as my father, Reverend Jones, would say, Reverend Donald Lee Jones, if you guys need to look him up, Elizabeth City, North Carolina. I'm in Charlotte. But the third thing that we want to think about is the nutrition that we may adjust in the menopause spectrum. And you probably heard this ad nauseum on the internet, maybe just today or this week: protein. Protein becomes a significant factor here, something that we definitely want to pay attention to nutritionally as you make your way across the menopause spectrum. And I hear the distant cries of the vegans. I don't mean that it has to be animal-based protein, vegans. Absolutely okay if it's plant-based protein. Maybe a little bit more challenging for you to get all the protein that you need. Some of you are pros at it, but protein becomes significant here in this menopause spectrum because of something that I cited earlier. Number one, the increased rate of muscle loss, sarcopenia, age-related muscle loss. Number two, the fact that at this point in your hormonal profile, with the first fluctuation of estrogen and eventual decline of estrogen, your body gets into a state where it's a little bit harder to maintain the muscle, but it's also a little bit harder to uptake protein to make more muscle. So something we call protein synthesis becomes a little bit more difficult in the absence of estradiol, E2, that type of estrogen. So now we've got to look at these two conflicting things. On one end, we're losing muscle at a rate. On the other end, it's a little bit harder to absorb protein from the protein that you eat, and that's not a good situation. So we need to be mindful and aware of our protein intake. I will stop short here of giving any advisement about the amount of protein that you uptake. Because number one, I don't want to freak you out about it. Number two, I don't know you, whoever you are out there. Thank you for being here. We can talk about that individually if you need to sort of try to figure out. Generally speaking, a palm size without your fingers. I can't cut my fingers off, but generally speaking, a palm size serving of protein with each meal, great start. Keep it that simple at first. For a lot of you out there, that may be more than you normally get. And the other thing I want you to think about is bookending your training with some type of fuel. So before you exercise, I know a lot of you are morning exercisers and you can't even fathom the thought of eating before you exercise. I get it. But before you exercise, if you get about 15 grams of protein, that could be a scoop in your morning hot latte frappa whipper. I don't drink coffee. You probably tell that by what I just said. Or I don't know, one boiled egg or something. Just getting a little fuel before you exercise becomes a little bit more crucial here because, again, the withdrawing estrogen, you're not as stress resilient as you might be. And we don't want you going into exercise in a stressed state. You can cross-reference fueling for exercise with Dr. Stacy Sims. That's probably the best immediate source, and see what she has to say about bookending your exercise in the menopause spectrum for active women with fuel. A little something before, after you exercise, 30 to 40 grams of protein would not be out of balance. And I know for some of you that's like a mind-blowing number. Again, I said it yesterday morning, and I can feel the clutching of pearls out there as I say this, because so many of you who survived the 80s along with me, I'm a 70s baby, 74, it's my year to turn 50, but so many of you survived the 70s and 80s and 90s when the constant message for women's health was eat less. I'm trying to do this and this, and I want to, diet. Or I want to get this copy, don't eat so much, right? And that messaging was so pervasive. It was so brainwashing that the idea of consuming fuel for your body to perform feels foreign. It feels like, why would I do that? why would I fuel for the activity that I'm going to ask my body to do? And just, I'm going to gain weight, right? We need to let that thinking go. That's another live session that we're not having right now. But bookending your exercise with nutrition is a very good idea at this stage. And I'm not going to go much further than that. So, quick and dirty live, Menopause 101, just some basics, how to advocate for yourself, what you may find you need to change in terms of your exercise, what you may find you need to prioritize in terms of your nutrition. And before I get out of here, I'm going to pay the bills one more time because my name is Ren Jones. I'm currently enrolling two more. I enroll 5 every enrollment period. 3 ladies have already signed on and they're ready to go. But I've got 2 more spots. If you're a woman out there over 30, want to get off the diet roller coaster, you want to build a better relationship with your body, right? Build a better relationship with food, fuel yourself for the activity that you're going to do and thrive through this phase of your life without calorie counting, without macronutrient counting. Nothing wrong with those things. I'm not attacking anybody. It's just something that I don't do. My ladies are busy and they don't have time to do algebra every time they want to eat. But there's nothing wrong with that methodology. Not dumping on anybody else's rainbow. But if that sounds like you, DM me the word live, Live. We'll have a quick chat. I'm going to ask you like 4 or 5 questions, so be prepared for that. I can't assist you without getting some information from you. So I'll ask you like 4 or 5 questions in the chat, and we'll see if my programs may be a good fit for you. I have a 12-week program. I have a separate 15-week program that's for women that are in the menopause transition, need a little bit more time to help them out. DM me the word live. We'll have a chat, see if it's a good fit for you. Enrollment for me ends tomorrow, actually. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Come back and watch the replay. If you're watching the replay after this thing goes silent and you got some questions, you just type them in right below this and I'll see if I can get you an answer. Until next time, let's keep it simple. Ladies, thank you for your time. Until next time, Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube, let's keep it simple. You got the goods. See if I can find my mouse. My mouse gets away from me.